This is the Moonlight Graham Show, a freewheeling conversation with the role players, the underdogs, and guys with flat-out great stories in sports.
Hello and welcome back to the Moonlight Graham Show. And our Moonlighter for today is a guy that you probably remember. He's a two-time Moonlighter, and his name is Sam Meuret. 2 years ago, I caddied for Sam Meuret, trying to qualify for the U.S. Amateur Golf Tournament. I was his caddy over in Omaha, Nebraska, where I carried his bag for 36 holes, and we just missed out on qualifying for the U.S. Amateur Tournament. But a couple of months back, I had, just an urge to get back on the caddying circuit. So I texted Sam and asked him if he was playing in any major golf tournaments this year and if he needed a caddy. And sure enough, Sam and his brother were planning on playing in the local qualifier for the U.S. Open golf tournament, the big time U.S. Open, the one that you see on Sundays with the best golfers in the world. Sam Meuret was playing in the local qualifier to try to get into the U.S. Open. And the way qualifying for the U.S. Open works, and I just love this about the U.S. Open in golf and the U.S. Open in tennis, is that almost anybody can try to qualify and play in the U.S. Open. As long as you have a handicap under 1.5, which I don't, but a lot of people out there do. If you're a good college golfer or a really good amateur golfer, your handicap is probably under 1.5. And if you have a registered handicap under 1.5, you are eligible to play in these local U.S. Open qualifiers. And there's 110 sites around the United States, and actually there's one in Canada, one in Japan as well. But there's 110 of these sites, and about 10,000 people each year try to qualify for the U.S. Open golf tournament through local qualifying. Out of that local qualifying, about 500 guys move on from that 10,000 and move on to the next round of final qualifying. Now, at the final qualifying round, this is where a lot of the PGA pros and Korn Ferry pros and Champions Tour guys who don't have to go through local qualifying, they get mixed in with all the 500 local qualifiers as well. And out of that group, about 75 guys make the final U.S. Open cut, where the field is about 150 people. So about half of the 150 people at the U.S. Open have to qualify through either local qualifying or final qualifying. But Sam, being that he's not a professional golfer and he's just a guy that works, but played 4 years of golf at the University of Iowa, still a really good player, he has to go through this local qualifying. Now, it should be noted that back in 2019, the last time that there was local qualifying, that 17 guys moved on from local qualifying through final qualifying all the way to the U.S. Open. 4 of those 17 guys actually made the cut at the U.S. Open back in 2019. So Sam has a real shot here. The last guy to win the U.S. Open by starting his journey at the local qualifier was Orville Moody back in 1969, but Ken Venturi did it in 1964 as well. So it has happened before that somebody has gone through the local qualifier, through the final qualifier, made the cut, and also won the tournament. And that's the hope for Sam here. So a couple of weeks back, Sam signs up for the local qualifier at the Beaver Hills Country Club in Cedar Falls, Iowa. And there's about 80 guys playing in this tournament at Beaver Hills, the top 4 of which will move on to the final qualifier. So I'm on Sam's bag for this local qualifier. And it was a great day of fun. Sam played unbelievably well. He shot 5 under par that day to get third and move on to the final qualifying round. So it started with 10,000 guys. It's moving on to 500 guys at 8 sites in the final qualifier. We don't know exactly which site Sam will be ended up at, but he's probably going to be mixed in with guys like Phil Mickelson and Ricky Fowler and guys like that who have not qualified for the U.S. Open yet, because there's tons of PGA pros that haven't qualified for the U.S. Open yet. Sam is now in that mix with those guys after getting third at the local qualifier up at Beaver Hills. So this is a lot of fun. I'm hoping to be on the bag for Sam as he tries to qualify for the U.S. Open. So for this episode of the podcast, Sam and I, we sit down, we go through the round that he played up at Beaver Hills. It was just 18 holes. The final qualifying round will be 36 holes played in one day. But he and I sit down, we go through that round. We go through kind of my job as a caddy because, of course, you got to have a good caddy. Sam will tell me where I went well, where I messed up. We'll talk about his game, his chances to make the U.S. Open tournament. And it gives you guys, as fans of the podcast, as Moonlighters out there, a guy to pull for on June 7th when that final qualifying round takes place. And so this is a lot of fun. Sam's been a good friend of the program for a long time. It was fun to caddy for him again. And it's fun to follow a story while it's still going on. I think you guys are really going to enjoy this episode of the podcast. And if you like what we're doing here on the Moonlight Graham Show, make sure to subscribe to our podcast wherever it is that you get your podcast. And we would love it if you left us a 5-star review. You can also follow the show, of course, on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We love hearing from you guys each and every week. So enjoy today's episode with Sam Meuret as he tries to qualify for the U.S. Open. Sam Meuret back on the podcast for the second time. It's been too long, Sam.
It has.
What have you been up to?
Not much. It was kind of a down year last year. I think we had some big plans last year, but they all kind of got canceled. So I'm glad we could do this again.
The last time you were on the podcast, of course, I was making my caddy debut in the Nebraska qualifier for the U.S. AM. Would that be how we term that?
That's correct.
And we played 36 holes in one day. We recorded the before part of the podcast on the way over to Omaha and the after our Culvers on the way back. And that's where you were introduced to the Moonlight Graham crowd.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
So today, we just had another golf experience this week that we're going to talk about because U.S. Open qualifying is underway. And so I'm currently sitting in your apartment. We just ate our Culvers, and so it's time for a podcast interview. But as most of the followers of the podcast know, because you probably follow me on social media, and I was tweeting about it on Monday of this week, Sam and I, we go over to Cedar Falls, Iowa, Beaver Hills Country Club over there to play in the local qualifying tournament for the 2021 U.S. Open golf tournament. And it was a great day, Sam.
It was.
How many times have you played in the local qualifying of the U.S. Open before?
It has been a little while. I'm not totally sure. Probably about 5 times. A couple times in high school, a couple times in college. It was always around postseason for college, so it wasn't something that we could play in every year. But it's been a few years.
And the way these work is about 10,000 people across the world, actually. It's not just the United States. Sign up for like local qualifiers. And out of those 10,000, about 500 people move on to the next round. And I think about maybe 75 people out of that 500 actually qualify out of the open qualifying to get into the U.S. Open with like the top 75 players in the world. Have you ever moved on? So I guess spoiler alert here, Sam got third at the Beaver Hills qualifier, and you are moving on to the final round of qualifying. Is this the first time you've ever done this?
Yes, first time I've made it through. Probably the lowest expectations I had going in. Maybe the first time I thought I had no chance. And there's probably a lesson in there about expectations that I won't learn. But yeah, this is my first time getting through.
So why were the expectations so low?
I just haven't played much golf, and I didn't feel particularly good about my game going in. I thought, after I saw the course, I thought it could fit. It didn't fit during the practice round. Yeah, and I wasn't hitting it well going into it, so expectations were low.
Yeah, that's the amazing thing about this is you had never seen the course before. You played a practice round on Sunday, the day before the event. You and your brother played a practice round. How'd it go?
Really poorly. The weather was a lot different. It was a lot hotter and a lot windier, and the wind was different, so the course played quite a bit different. But I did not make a birdie in the practice round, and I don't even want to add up what I actually shot.
If you guys remember the first episode we did with Sam, when you described your game, you're a bomb and gouge guy.
Pretty much,
right?
Yeah.
Hit as far as you possibly can off the tee, And then no matter where it is, hopefully you're going to be pretty close to the green so you can play, a wedge into the green or something like that. That's your game. Mm-hmm. But Beaver Hills, it was a pretty tight course with a lot of dog legs, some skinny fairways. Yeah, it wouldn't be like your type of course.
No, no, it really wasn't. It ended up being kind of the way it played. It played a little slower because there was a little rain. So it played a little bit more in my favor that way, where the ball wasn't bouncing into as much trouble. And I was able to pick some lines where it was a little more open than the fairway looked, I would say.
So let's talk about, what are your thoughts going into this at the point of your career that you're at right now? Because you're no longer, like a collegiate golfer. You're no longer a competitive golfer. You're just a guy that works a job, and you play golf, a couple of times a week, probably like the rest of us. And going into this, like, why are you still playing in these events?
Really, I just love competitive golf. Just gets the juices flowing in a way that a weekend round with your buddies doesn't. So I just really enjoy being nervous on the golf course. I like that. I like hitting putts that mean something and hitting tee shots that mean something.
Were there nerves on Monday?
Yes. It wasn't actually that bad. And I think it goes back to the expectations thing. I was less nervous than I would have thought if you had told me what I ended up shooting. I was nervous kind of on the opening few holes, as I kind of always am. And then I was relaxed from there and never got too bad.
So I want to talk about the field a little bit at these Beaver Hills. I think we had like 75 guys or something playing, and the top 4 guys move on to the next round. So when you look at the field, what are you thinking? Like, are you thinking like that's 75 good golfers, or are you thinking there's 20 guys I got to worry about?
I would say the biggest thing I've learned from these qualifiers in the past, even though I haven't made it, is that the score is usually not as low as you think if you look at the field. So there's a lot of pros in the field. You see some pros from out of state that are trying to chase an Iowa qualifier, and you're like, we got to worry about that guy. But usually the score ended up just being the score, and it's not too bad. So it's really not, in my experience, been worth it to kind of count the guys that you have to beat. It's just usually not a helpful way to look at it. It's usually if you put in a good round, because there's 4 spots, not 1 or 2, you can handle a guy or 2 going really low, and it doesn't really matter because there's more spots than that.
So we're on the range before the round, and you're looking across the range. And by the way, the Beaver Hills range in Cedar Falls, big disappointment in my book. I thought it was crap. Like, we got a USGA event that's a U.S. Open qualifier, and there's like 8 spots on the range. We had to wait. We had to wait to hit balls. I say we. You had to wait to hit balls. And I was just really disappointed by the range. But as you're like, are you sizing other guys up on the range, or is it truly like, I'm playing against the course today, and I'm not worried about anybody else?
It's really the second one. I wasn't really looking at other guys, and honestly, if they had watched me hit balls before the round, they wouldn't have been worried about me either. The range session was not great, but it's mostly just playing the course. And if you put a good round in, you probably get through.
So why is it that you played 4 years at Iowa, and you played a lot of competitive golf growing up? How is it that now your game is good enough to move on? How did your best round come out now?
There's a little bit of randomness in there. I mean, it's just 18 holes, which is the other thing about the U.S. Open local that throws a little bit of chaos in there. Is just that 18 holes, almost anybody can shoot a good 18-hole round.
Almost anybody. Trust me.
Yeah, it's. But I feel like there have been times where I've played better and shot worse. It's just kind of what happens over an 18-hole span. Yeah, I don't think there's any more to it than that.
It's curious because, the question is like, man, Sam's playing in the final round of qualifying for the U.S. Open here. What if he just spent more time practicing golf, right? How much better would you be? Like, are you hitting your prime and you're giving up on golf before your prime even comes?
It's not. I've spent a lot of years practicing, which are not these years, and it's not quite that simple. Usually it's in the past, people watch you play golf, and it's like, oh, if he would just practice his short game a little bit more, he'd be a heck of a player. And it's like, I'm working on the short game, all right? It's not quite as easy as you think.
But you hit it so far. Like, there are not many guys, certainly at Beaver Hills, Like, you were hitting it so far at Beaver Hills that the people on the holes in front of us were looking back, and these are all good golfers. Some of them professional golfers, some of them high-level amateur golfers, and they're like, who in the hell is driving it over here?
That's it can be an advantage or a disadvantage. It's usually an advantage, but the disadvantage of that is that I can get to some trouble that other guys don't have to think about, and that's where the rain really helped me, to be honest, in the little bit cooler day. Some of the stuff I saw in the practice round where my ball would get to off the tee, then it would no longer get to. And so I think it fit in that way, and being able to pick some lines where the fairway is not exactly my goal. My goal is to stay out of big trouble. And so I can aim away from some water or some out of bounds, just to keep the ball in play.
What other guys that you've played with hit it farther than you?
There have been a few. Played with a guy in high school that really hit the ball far. This is Riley Reinertson. Played against him a lot in high school. Small town kid from Nebraska that ended up playing for Oklahoma. But he would always, I haven't played with him in a long time, but he would always blow it by me in high school. And then there were guys throughout college that I would see.
But there's not many.
No, there aren't many.
Yeah, I mean, I know you're looking uncomfortable. You're talking about how far you hit it, but like, it needs to be stated that you hit the crap out of the ball. Like, you were probably the longest hitter at Beaver Hills. I mean, there was some guys, I guess. There was a guy in the group behind us that was putting it out there quite a bit, but people's heads were turning with where you were putting the ball. And I think to illustrate that point, let's walk through the round a little bit, because first of all, it's raining in Cedar Falls, and we've mentioned that a couple of times, but coming into the tournament, we're looking at the radar. We're texting each other back and forth, being like, oh, man, are we even going to have this tournament? Because the radar made it seem like there's going to be thunderstorms all throughout the day. We show up, and it's like spitting, sprinkling on and off for the whole round. What are you thinking as a player when you see that forecast and you show up and, we got the weather that we did?
It was weird leading up because it did look like it was thunderstorms all day, which obviously would be the only thing that we wouldn't play in. But the time we got to that morning, it looked like things had cleared up a little bit, and it looked like, it's going to rain a little bit, but it won't be a steady downpour, which is really the issue. Because if you get rain for too long, it's just once stuff gets wet, it stays wet. And so if you can manage through the bouts of rain, it doesn't affect it that much.
So we get up on the first tee, and we're paired with Connor. We call him the Con Man. I was calling him the Con Man. And Connor was a UNI golfer. Great kid. He's only like 19 years old. The kid looked 25 to me. I was really surprised when he said he was 19. And his actually girlfriend was on the bag as well. And her name was Ashley. Really nice couple. Well, and then the third player in the group was your brother.
Yeah.
Your brother, Matt. And the funny part about this is apparently this was completely random.
Yeah, when we saw the pairings come out, we thought this had to be a mistake because they would not pair two guys with the same last name together. And we ended up finding out that it was a mistake.
Yeah.
They apologized to us that it was an oversight. It was randomized tee times, which I think most of them are. I think they would have messed with that had they seen the pairing, but it slipped by.
I don't know if they even realized it until I made the comment on the first hole and said, you guys related? And everybody laughs. And then I think the USGA officials realized, oh my gosh, these guys are brothers.
You just had to panic rippling through the
I think I did.
staff.
I saw the look on that guy's face. He was like a little bit confused.
Yeah.
It's like, this shouldn't be that way. And to that point, after the round, they had to go to Connor directly and asked if you and Matt were cheating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They had
really
to have him
that.
there. Yeah, which seems fair.
Yeah, I mean, because technically, Matt could turn a blind eye to something you were doing, or you could turn a blind eye to something Matt was doing out there, and you guys could have cheated your way to the U.S. Open. But it didn't happen. Everybody was, played it straight out there. So we get onto the first tee, and the first hole, I think, was like a 400-yard hole.
385, I think.
It was 385, yep. Right down the chute with the first hole, and your first drive, Sam, you hit it probably 360. Would you say 360, 370?
Yeah, I got up there. It was a front pin, and I was pin high, so whatever that would be.
Yeah, you're right.
I was just left of the pin.
So you hit your first drive like 370 to 380 yards, and had a great lie. Where the rough on this course wasn't really all that rough.
Wasn't too long.
It was really good rough. And then your second shot, we almost hole out for eagle on the first hole.
Yeah, that was a fun start because the day before it's blowing into the wind. I hit it left over there, and so I told you when we were walking off the first tee, I think that's okay because I think I can get past those trees that stop at about 80 yards, and then we walk up there and find it green high, and almost chip it in. So it was a fun start.
And when I say almost chip it in, literally there was a piece of the ball hanging over the cup, and it wasn't one of those that you need to wait to see if it's going to fall because the base of the ball wasn't hanging over, but there was a part of the ball hanging over it. It was just literally as close of a tap in as you can have for a birdie on number one.
It's a fun way to start.
It's a fun way to start. And I should say, like, the game plan coming in that we were texting about was we got to score on the par fives. There's 4 par fives. Let's birdie all 4 par fives and play everything else even. So after the birdie on one, we feel like, hey, we got one up on our plan here.
It's a bonus.
It's a bonus. And then what was the second hole?
Easy par 5 around the corner.
That's right. It was an easy par 5 around the corner. And your second shot, you left out to the right of a bunker, and you end up parring the par 5.
Sort of a sign of things to come. Hit the tee shot in play, and then a really poor iron shot from not very far away that set up a little tougher finish on a par 5 than I wanted.
Well, and that was kind of the theme of the day, though. It was like we didn't score. I keep saying we because we're a team here. But you didn't score as well on the par 5s as you had intended, but your short game was really good. Like you chipped in on what, number 4?
Number 5.
Number 5 for another birdie, and then you had that great chip on number 1 that you almost made eagle on, and it was almost like your wedge game is what saved the day for you.
That's what kind of goes into the randomness of 18 holes. For 18 holes, I had a great short game, which is usually not the style that I play, but it worked.
Yeah. So at what point, like, you eventually get to 5 under, right? And at what point do you start thinking that this score might be good enough to win, or maybe not win, but get past? It
was about around that time. I knew that the front 9 and the first part of the second 9 were the easiest parts of the course, and then it was kind of going to be tough coming in. And so I wasn't really comfortable with that score until I got to 5 and maybe made a few pars after that. And then I started to settle in and think like, okay, if I can get this home, I know there aren't really many birdie opportunities left, and it was starting to rain a little bit harder. So then I was comfortable, like, if I can get this into the house, I think I can.
Yeah. Did you think as the rain picked up, did you think that was good for you or bad for you?
I thought it was bad for me. We had a later tee time, so a lot of guys had already finished, and so I thought a lot of the players have already finished. They don't have to play in this rain, so it's kind of it's less than ideal that it's raining at the end of the round. But it wasn't too bad or too many holes where I didn't think it was
You said that quite a bit during the round. I remember like, oh man, those guys that had the early tee times, they really got lucky. Yeah,
there's always a good and bad draw. It's not nearly as pronounced as it is if there's a morning wave and an afternoon wave. If there's an afternoon wave, that would have been kind of rough. But just that hour and a half difference maybe from my tee time to the first one, and obviously everybody in between has a little bit of a different experience, but everybody played in a little bit different weather.
From my perspective, so I'm the caddy here. And my job is, people are asking me, oh, you caddied. And everybody's asking me like, so do you give club selection tips? Do you help read putts and all this stuff? And it's like, no, I don't do any of this stuff. I don't know hardly anything about golf. Sam is an awesome golfer, has played 1,000 more rounds in his life than I have. There's nothing that I can tell you about golf that's going to help you on the course. But my job on a day like that is to keep the clubs dry. That's my main, keep Sam as dry as I can, but mostly keeping the clubs dry. And so as that rain picked up, I got the clubs hanging off one shoulder. I got to carry the umbrella off the other shoulder. But then I also had to, get the pin out. I had to replace divots. I had to clean the clubs after every one of your shots, had to dry the ball. So I had a lot going on, Sam.
Rain really works you hard. And I told you that before the round.
Yep.
I said, your job, keep these clubs dry. Don't worry about me. Keep the clubs dry, because once they get wet, it's kind of over. Because then if you can't hang on to the club and it's still raining, things can go south pretty quickly.
Well, and the other thing was you were messing with what you were wearing. You actually had 3 different tops on, right? You had like a long sleeve top, you had a rain top, like a Cutter and Buck short sleeve rain top, and then you had just your polo on underneath that. And you went through 3 different iterations of that through the round. Mm-hmm. So what was kind of your thought process around like what's the right thing to wear during the rain? Because it wasn't that cold.
No, it was kind of a weird temperature, but I was a little bit unprepared. I hadn't since I graduated college, I don't play in the rain anymore. It's kind of like I had to play in this for so long that now that I can choose when I get to play golf, I don't play in the rain.
Yeah, why would you?
And so I was not prepared, didn't have the rain gear necessary. So I brought my rain jacket that I figured I would wear if it started raining. And it was a weird temperature, about 60. So it was like in between a jacket and a polo.
Humid, a little bit muggy.
Yeah. And I started wearing the rain jacket and it was kind of too small. So it was nice when it was raining, but it was a little bit awkward to swing in. So that was mostly, if I had a well-fitting rain jacket, I probably would have just worn that for the most part, even though they're always a little bit uncomfortable to swing in, but that one was especially.
Yeah, you were like taking it on, putting it off. So I had to have your rain jacket in my pouch. Like I was rocking the rain jacket in my pouch.
To be fair, you didn't have to have it in your pouch. You wanted to keep as many things as possible in the pouch.
Oh yeah, the rangefinder. I had the rangefinder in the pouch as well.
Another voluntary pouch item.
I don't know. I think it's better if I have it in the pouch though, because I don't want you bending over to get it out of the bag every time. Like that could be a back injury waiting to happen.
I probably could have managed to pull
I'm
it
just
out of the
saying,
bag.
like this is the role of the caddy. You know, I'm making your life as easy. I will say, shout out to Ashley. She started picking up the pin every now and again after like hole 5. I think she started getting a little bit better feel. She was caddying for Connor, so she helped me out a few times by getting the pin. There was a couple of times where people didn't want the pin out either. So, you know, I'm constantly navigating that.
Yeah, it's tough. That's something that's changed, honestly, since I've last played competitive golf. That rule changed. And so most of the time when you would have the caddy tend the flag, you would just leave it in because not many people are planning to hit it from 50 or 60 feet. And so that was a little different. But I will say, I kind of thought you might be a little bit uncomfortable. You hadn't caddied in a couple years, and I know that was your first time. You really settled right in. Yeah. You were a lot more comfortable. Last time there were some shaky moments, standing in weird places, not sure quite what to do, but you looked really comfortable out there.
Well, I think part of it was when we're over playing in the USGA event in Nebraska, there are officials and marshals on about every hole. They are just well staffed over there in Nebraska. There might have been 3 guys on the course for the USGA Iowa. And, you know, I don't know what type of operation they're running over there, but it was like I was nervous with all the officials and marshals like looking over my shoulder. Am I doing things right? Am I doing things wrong? When it was my first time. So I think I understand it a little bit more. And there was nobody looking over our shoulder at all in Beaver Hills.
I think a lot of that was they were placed throughout the course for ball spotting because there were a lot more spots where maybe you're going over a hill. This one was a lot more clear about where the ball was going. It's all kind of in between the fences and the water, so it wasn't too bad.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about, because when we were over in Nebraska a couple of years ago, you went in the sand quite a bit. And so I raked the sand quite a bit, and I had forgotten like what to do with the rake after I rake it. Like, where's the best spot to put a rake that's out of the way, that's not going to, you know, change the game, right? Because you don't want a ball hitting a rake ultimately, right? It's an object on the course that shouldn't be on the course. And you only went in the sand one time on the round on Monday. And I was finishing rake it up, and then I was like, where's the best? I don't remember where I picked it up from. So where do I put it? And I kind of put it like at an angle with the teeth in the sand, and it was angled out. And then I looked around as I was walking off the green. I was like, no other rakes are like that. So I don't know. What's the protocol? What's the etiquette here?
I'm going to be honest, that's not something I've ever thought about. I've just put the rake usually back behind the bunker. I'm sure there are theories on this. I don't really have one. That if you put it over the bunker, somebody could hit the rake and come back in, which isn't cool. So usually you put it before, you know, as a courtesy to other players. I have never seen somebody put it teeth in the sand pointing out. And I did see you do that, but
it's almost like I was funneling balls into the bunker, you know? Yeah. So I don't know if I did it right. I'll have to watch some YouTube videos on that. But I guess overall, Sam, how'd I do as a caddy?
Really good. I mentioned you seemed more comfortable than I expected you to be. You really settled in pretty quickly. Club stayed dry. It's a lot different job when it's raining. And I thought you handled it well.
All right. Thank you. the other piece there that I wanted to mention is we're playing with your brother. Okay, so is that a good thing or a bad thing for you?
I thought it was kind of a neutral thing. I mean, we were excited to play together, but it's one of those things where if he was beating me, would that have felt worse than another player beating me? So I don't know how that would have felt. But I mean, we were excited.
Him, or are you competitive with him still?
We're still pretty competitive, and so yeah, it did feel. I mean, yeah, it felt pretty good to beat him.
You should mention your brother had it going there.
He did, yeah, and he had actually. It's funny because the last few times we've played together, he's beat me, and I've kind of tried to block that out. Like, no. I always beat Matt. But the last few times we'd played, he'd beat me every time. And
he's a professional.
Yeah, returning.
Trying to get his amateur
status back, so he's got kind of special status. So he was a golf pro for a little while, and he's been out of that business for a while, so he's getting his amateur status back.
At one point, he had 4 birdies in a row, and a couple of those birdie putts, one was an absolute bomb. Another one was just a really tricky putt that I didn't think he had any chance of making, and he got it to 3 under. And at one point, if you were looking at the leaderboard, you thought, man, there might be 2 Meurets that get into this thing.
That would have been pretty cool. I told you as we started the round, he plays a completely different game than me. There's going to be a few holes where he rolls in a long putt and I miss a short one, and you're going to say, how in the world did he just beat you on that hole? But he does that 6 times around, probably to me. But then he really got it rolling because he struggled at the beginning, and then he made those 4 birdies in a row. And I think I looked at you and was like, is he beating me right now?
Yeah, I kind of
lost track of where he was.
Well, the thing about Matt, and it plays a good game, good ball striker. He made some really great shots, good shot maker. But, the shirt kept coming untucked with Matt. And I just thought, USGA event, we're in US Open qualifying, and to walk around this course with your shirt untucked, it's a little sloppy.
I feel like you're leading me to say that the difference was me having a caddy and him not having a caddy, because he was a bit of a mess the whole time, because it's tough to handle the umbrella and play golf. And so that was a burden that he had all by himself. And I think the shirt untucked might be related.
I will say that I think the caddy made a big difference. I don't mean to say like I personally made a big difference, but I think anyone that had a caddy on Monday, I think had a big advantage over somebody that didn't, because you saw guys like, and Matt was an example of this, but the last 4, 5, 6 holes, they are waterlogged. They've been battling with their umbrella, their clubs, rain gear, all this stuff. Like at one point, Matt had his shoes off and was putting his rain gear on under a tree. You know what I mean? And he had to like put everything else down to the side while it's getting wet while he's doing that. It was just a big disadvantage. I could have helped him. I actually gave him my umbrella too.
You did. He was completely unprepared. But it was a big difference. It's a big difference in the rain. With 18 holes, it's like everybody can carry their own bag for 18 holes without getting too worn down. But the rain makes a big difference.
I will say, so you asked me like how I was doing on like 12 or 13. And I said, oh, great. And honestly, I was struggling a little bit. And I haven't admitted this to you, but like some of the just the carrying the clubs and like having the awkward umbrella hold while I'm carrying the clubs for a lot, like was really wrenching my back. and like the last couple holes, I'm not kidding, my lower back was really hurting. And actually, while we were waiting on a par 3, there was a canopy that we all sat down on. And I don't know if you noticed, but I sat down for as long as I possibly could before we had to move because my back was on fire.
I did not notice you were hurting that bad.
Yeah. And actually, at that canopy was the first time we checked the leaderboard. Mm-hmm. So one thing that I'm really interested about and why I really enjoy caddying is I've never played competitive golf. I've only watched it on TV. And so I'm always curious of like, do these guys know what place they're in? Because on TV, it's just like, yeah, we got the ticker on the bottom right. We see the leaderboard at all times. Of course, this guy knows he's 2 shots back and he needs to go for it here. But it's not like that, especially in this USGA event. We're going out there. We don't know. We're kind of talking amongst ourselves. What do you think it's going to be, 68, 69? Is somebody going to shoot a 65? We know that you're playing well, but we have no idea where you sit until I checked the leaderboard on the par 3. I think it was like maybe 13 or 14.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So I didn't really – I asked you after I saw you were checking it but I don't think it would have changed that much. So basically at that point, I think I was in third, or maybe tied for second maybe. And then there's one guy 1 shot back, at 4 under. And so at that point I knew, 5 was probably good. But even then, without knowing where everybody is on the course, they could be playing the front 9, so there could be a bunch of birdie opportunities coming up, and it only takes a couple guys to come up and knock you out. And so it didn't really change anything for me. The only reason I think it would have changed something for me was if I was in first by a couple shots, or the 5th place person was even par 1 under, then it maybe changes something a little bit where it's like, okay, I've got a pretty big cushion. But at that point, even though I was placed high enough to make it, there was still enough golf to play that it didn't really change anything for me.
Is it worth even looking at? If you know it's not going to change how you're going to play, is it worth looking at because now you're thinking about it?
For me it is. I know some people don't want to look. For me it is, just because if there were 4 guys at 7 under par, I'd want to know that. And then if the cut was at 1, I really had no gauge of what the qualifying score was going to be. Because once I got out there and started playing it was playing kind of easy that day. And so I thought it might be a lot lower than I expect.
Your brother kept saying somebody's going to go really low today.
Yeah. And so you can handle somebody going really low, but you can't handle 4 guys going really low. And so I just didn't know how to gauge where the cut line was going to be. And so I did want to know, because I might play it slightly differently if I'm a couple out, knowing that there aren't really many birdie opportunities, but maybe I try to push the ball further up the fairway, take a little different clubs off the tee if I know I need to make a couple birdies coming in.
On 18, I thought it was pretty obvious that you were going to make the cut, because all of a sudden we hadn't seen many marshals all day. And all of a sudden, not only do we see like a marshal out there, but we see a photographer come out that's obviously taking pictures of you, for the social media posts and stuff later in the day. You said you didn't notice it. I asked you about it later. You said you didn't notice it. I thought it was blatantly obvious.
I still don't even know where he was, and I haven't seen a picture. So I didn't see that. And so by the time I finished, I didn't really know. I tapped in and didn't know the scores for a few holes. And so I really wasn't sure.
Interesting. So we've talked about we have some good banter on the course. I think that's kind of fun, is like, I never knew, do players talk much? Do they talk with one another? How's that work? And when I'm caddying for you, we're kind of just talking like we normally talk for like 4 hours. Are other players as talkative as you are? Because you're pretty talkative.
I feel like that was a little bit of an insult thrown at the end of that question.
What?
Are other players as talkative as you?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Like,
no,
you talk a lot.
It really varies, and it depends a lot on the group. Like if I'm playing with a buddy, like if you weren't there and I was playing with my brother, I probably would have talked to him a lot. Or if I have a caddy, I'll talk to my caddy quite a bit. But if there are other guys that I don't know, I'll hardly talk at all. And so it doesn't really, I think it was helpful. It's helpful to have somebody to walk with and talk about whatever you want to talk about, and kind of take your mind off golf in between shots.
Yeah, the big topic of our round was we didn't know whether Connor and Ashley were brother and sister or dating. It was never clear. It was never clear to us. And we don't, we had our phones, like, I actually had, my phone was off for most of the round until I checked the leaderboard. And so I guess most of the round we were trying to figure out, like, through context clues, whether they were boyfriend or girlfriend or brother and sister.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we ever really figured it out throughout the round. I didn't know. But it was a good distraction. It was a good
helpful distraction. Yeah. I think we've landed on that they're boyfriend and girlfriend, but they could be brother and sister with different last names too.
It's true.
But it was remarkable how difficult that was.
Yeah. You don't really think about it, but I don't. Yeah. It's not something I had even considered until you asked me about the 8-or-9th hole. I hadn't really thought about it, but then it's all we could talk about.
Well, okay, speaking of that, like, one of the things I've heard from, on TV a lot about caddies is when you're in contention, the player has a tendency to walk fast. And the caddy's job is to walk slower, to slow down the player, because they'll get excited and they're burning more energy than they need to. And just the littlest changes in, like, your heart rate and all this stuff can have a big effect when it comes to golf. You're a fast walker.
Really fast. Yeah.
Really fast.
In everyday life and golf, I walk really fast.
Yeah. Maybe that's part of the back pain too, as I was trying to keep up with you. But Is there any thought to you of like, hey, when I'm in contention, I need to tell myself I need to slow down?
Not as much as there probably should be, because I know it happens to me too. I'm fast anyway, and so it doesn't feel very weird for me to just speed up even more. I notice it. Usually I just kind of remind myself to take a step back, take a deep breath when I can feel like there's a little bit of more nerves on the shot than usual. But I don't think about it very much.
Well, this is a tip. I think you need to slow down. Well, especially I think like the next round, it's 36 holes, right? Mm-hmm. So like you said, anybody can go out for 18 holes, no big deal. But 36 is a totally different game because all of a sudden stamina comes in, right? And especially if it's going to be a hot day in early June in Columbus, Ohio, like I think you need to start worrying about like the water intake, how fast am I walking, what's my heart rate at, like all of that stuff.
Probably 36 holes is just a lot different than 18. I mean, it's a long day. You're playing on 2 different golf courses, I think. And so it's a lot different of a day, and you need to think about a lot more stuff.
How excited are you for the next round?
I'm really excited. I hadn't even considered it. Didn't even know when the next qualifier was before I played, and then I qualified and thought, I don't know. I didn't think I'd make it this far, and so I hadn't really looked forward to look at the golf course, look at the date. I didn't even know the date, but I'm really excited now.
So you've been kind of self-deprecating about your game a little bit, but how much of you is thinking about Roy McIlroy and like the underdog story, the guy that comes out of nowhere, to shoot a miraculous 36 holes and be the last qualifier into the U.S. Open?
It's just kind of, I've got golfer brain like everybody else does, where it's like, I know these guys are all better than me, but it's like one day. And so it's like, there's like a 1% of me that's like, but maybe every time I think like there's no chance. It's like, there's still that small part in the back of your brain. And it's like, what if I had an absolute perfect day that I've never had before? And so there is that small part of it. I mean, I think that's why this whole process is so fun, because even signing up for the U.S. Open local, it's cool to think like this is the first round for our national open. It's just kind of a cool thing like that. But having never been this far, I don't know how I'll feel that day. But there is a small part of you that's like, well, I made it this far.
One of the cool things about it is like you could potentially be paired with like, a couple of PGA Tour guys, like a Steve Stricker or Phil Mickelson hasn't qualified. I think he's got a sponsor exemption if he wants it, but he could potentially like go through the qualifier in earnest way. And so like you could potentially be paired with these guys. What's like the best case scenario pairing, like your dream pairing that could potentially happen?
I don't know quite well enough who hasn't qualified, but it is pretty strict. The exemptions they're not that deep. They leave a lot of spots open for sectionals. And because there's a PGA Tour event in Columbus that week, that Monday we'll have a lot. If I get in, I haven't been placed yet, but that's where I set my priority. But that would be a really cool field. Phil is the guy that I've heard that might have to play in it. That would be awesome. Yeah. And I mean, there's a bunch of guys, but I'm not sure exactly who will be in the field.
That's going to be. So what's your plan?
What do you mean? What's the plan?
Like we got a month to go here before you're playing in the next round. Like how many times are you playing per week? Are you at the range? Are you working on your short game? Like what are we doing over the next month?
It's been a light practice week, post in celebration of the round, but I haven't thought that far either. I'm sure as we get closer, I'll start feeling the itch a little bit and start practicing a lot more. I'll practice a lot more in the next month than I did the last month for sure. But yeah, I don't have a set plan.
What about like going out there early? Are you going to be able to get a round in on the course before you actually play it for real?
Yeah, I haven't looked at anything just because I haven't been placed.
What the hell is going on here, Sam?
But I'm guessing once I get placed, I think it'll feel a little more real. I'll start to make a little bit more of a plan. But I know Columbus there are enough guys in the field that they need 2 courses. And so I'm sure I'll go out early and get a practice round no matter where I go. But it'll be a little earlier if I get into Columbus because I want to play both courses, probably Saturday, Sunday. So I'll be out there a couple days before and hopefully get as prepared as possible on the actual course.
Do you have to like take work off for this, or like how? Because like you're not a professional golfer, right? Like how does work understand when you're like, hey, trying to qualify for the U.S. Open here? Are they like, oh, great for you, Sam? We'll put it up on our company webpage. Like how is the employer handling this?
It was kind of funny because I told I told work before, like the week before, I mentioned like, hey, I'm actually playing a golf tournament next Monday. That's why I'm gone. It's a qualifier. I said, not going to have to worry about the next round in a couple of weeks. And then I got a text on that day and just said, how do you play? It was like, well, I actually do need to take another day off. So yeah, I'm taking some PTO to go play in this.
And they're excited about it?
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, every company needs to have something like that to brag about, right? You know, I mean, it's good conversation starter. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about, our arrangement here. Am I caddying for you in the next round?
You're in if you want in.
I mean,
you got me there.
You're right, I did. And my back's still painful.
Yeah. So if you could physically handle it,
here's the thing, though, Sam. It's like, okay, I mean, this is a pretty cool thing. Is this something that, like, I need to be noble and back out so your dad or your brother can caddy for you?
No, I don't think so.
Like, if you have Phil Mickelson in your group, your dad or your brother wants to also be, in that group with you.
You might. My guess is that they would protect Phil Mickelson from playing with an amateur from Iowa if he does have to play this qualifier.
You can outdrive him.
So I think he's safe. That he's not going to play with me. But you might have to fight him if it was Phil. But any other circumstance, I mean, I heard from my other brother, and he said, "You're taking Tim, right?" And I said, "Yeah, I have to."
He gets it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's say it works out. I got a busy schedule, and so I got a lot going on.
You get your body right first.
Yeah. Yeah, I got to put a workout plan together too. But let's say we make the Open. Okay. Let's say we make the cut. What's my cut if we get in the money? Or can you accept money?
100% of my earnings because I can't accept money. I have thought if I made it, I wonder if you could turn pro.
I think if I could designate ahead of time.
Yeah. If I could turn pro Friday night of the U.S. Open after learning that I had already made it, I would do that. But I don't think that's possible. But I'm an amateur, so right as it stands today, I couldn't make any money anyway. But listen. We can work out whatever you want. Well, if I make it that far, I'll give you half. I don't care.
Here's the deal. Like, I wouldn't accept half, but I'd accept 25%. Like, can you imagine, even at this next round, like, there's a lot of good, I mean, I shouldn't say there's a lot of good swag, but like, we stole as many USGA tees as we could from the first round. Mm-hmm. I got to imagine the USGA swag at the next round is going to be, 10 times what it was.
I think it's mostly tees. That's why the tees are so special. The only time you see those tees are in USGA qualifiers and USGA championships. And so that's where
towels, markers.
I don't think so. Not in anything I've played.
Dang it.
But I've never been to here, so who knows?
Well, okay. Let's jump ahead then and say we make the US Open.
We're jumping way ahead.
We're jumping way ahead here, but like I guess even at the next round, there's going to be a lot of like TaylorMade sponsors, Callaway guys there, they're going to probably be wanting you to wear their stuff, right?
Yeah, no, probably not. I mean,
if you make the U.S. Open,
yes,
you can have sponsors reaching out. Like, you have a Stripe golf hat on right now. Like, Stripe's probably going to send some swag for you. Callaway's going to send you some stuff. I'll be decked out head to toe in like whatever you want me to wear.
Yeah, I mean, I'll wear whatever anybody sends me. I don't have sponsors beating down the door right now. But if you want to get in early and be there for the U.S. Open, I mean, now would be the chance.
Yeah, I wonder if I should start sending out some feelers. Like, seriously, should I send out some feelers to some brands to see if we can?
You can absolutely keep 50% of whatever you can you can milk out of some brands.
Hey, we're playing in the Columbus qualifier at Brookside. We got the 9:20 tee time. Any brands out there that want us, to be rocking their stuff? We are in a blank billboard.
Yeah, I will paint myself like a NASCAR for the next round if anybody will take it.
Well, I mean, you got to feel pretty good about where you're at. Like, I think one of the coolest things about where you're at right now is that you still have a month in front of you before like the biggest golf tournament of your life. In the anticipation of events like this are oftentimes more enjoyable than the actual events. Cause like once they're past, it's just a memory, but like the feeling you probably have right. I mean, the feeling I have right now is pretty great, but is it good to be like where you're at right now, knowing that you have this great tournament out in front of you?
Yeah, it feels really good. Especially because it's kind of a no lose. I didn't think I'd make it there, and so this is it's all gravy at this point, and I think it'll be really fun. And I don't think I'll be that nervous just because of that fact. There's not really the expectations aren't super high, and so I think it'll be a blast.
Well, it was a blast on Monday of this week caddying for you. It was probably the most fun I've ever had on the golf course. I don't know. I mean, the 36 holes over Nebraska was pretty fun too, but this was really fun because, we won. I guess we didn't even win. Yeah. We got third. But I like to think that we won.
Yeah. It felt like a win.
It felt like a win. So thanks for letting me be on the bag. Thanks for helping the Twitter account out. And, we got it. Let's get our game right.
Thanks for doing it.
June 7th.
We'll put a plan together. Longest day in golf.
The longest.
That's what they call it.
That's what some people out there call it. The Nebraska AM was pretty long. Nobody that calls the U.S. Open qualifier the longest day in golf has played the Nebraska AM at 95 degrees.
That's probably fair.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on, Sam.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
Hey guys, thanks once again to listening to today's episode of the Moonlight Graham Show. And even though I do most of the interviews here on the podcast, there is a ton of work that happens behind the scenes that you guys don't see that make each episode possible. So I got to give a shout out to the Moonlight Graham Show team. First of all, Brian Sandvig, our producer. Brian does all of the post-production work. And in real life, he's not just a podcast producer, he's also a real estate agent. So if you're looking to buy or sell a home down in the Kansas or Missouri areas, give Brian Sandvig a call. Next guy on that list is Brendan Gargano. Brendan does all of our design and artwork here on the podcast. He's one of the most talented artists I've ever met, and I love all of his work. If you need any help on the design side with logos or anything like that, give Brendan Gargano a call. The next guy on that list is Andy Flattery, my older brother. Andy, of course, has done some of the interviews here on the podcast. He also is a certified financial planner. He owns a business called Simple Wealth Planning. If you need any help in that area, check Andy Flattery out. And then, of course, the trusty co-host Tom Griffin and my younger brother Neil Flattery. Those guys are just busy being husbands, being fathers, they're family men, but also they do a ton of work here on the show. So thanks again for listening. We really appreciate you guys subscribing and supporting the Moonlight Graham Show.